The story begins with a woman calling for the player. His name is Jung Suin, and she extends her hand, warning that there is not much time left. It is explained that the demon of greed led a demonic army, and thus created a temple made of rare gold. This temple originally existed at the top of the tower. However, after the third divine demonic war, the remaining demonic forces, including this temple, were expelled. The demons ended up being exterminated, and this place, which seemed to enjoy peace, was suddenly attacked and eventually annihilated. The intruders moved through constellations with a power surpassing that of the gods and thus wiped out all the players. As a result, the tower became a graveyard for players. As he walks, the hero thinks that he can't believe the era of the 10,000 demons has fallen to the 22nd floor. But in this way, he has the chance to turn the game around to find what he was searching for, the vault and Ramona. With a gaze full of determination, he begins to consider the possibility of going back in time. The system notifies that the player Sion has entered the era of the 10,000 demons. This is the first time a player has entered this era, achieving a historic feat, and it is said that he has entered the realm of the gods as a human. Relieved, the hero says that he has finally arrived. Looking around, he realizes that this is the era of the 10,000 demons and is impressed. Suddenly, the ceiling starts to collapse, and he wonders if he has realized where he is. At that moment, he decides to use the unique skill Journey Guide. This is the best skill for exploration, adventure, and searching obtained through the hero's leap. Using the skill, he asks it to lead him to the vault in Amona. Quickly, he starts running toward the crystal to find what he seeks. However, he becomes confused as he realizes he is heading toward a dead end. Being at least somewhat intelligent, the protagonist realizes that this is a secret passage, so he pulls a candelabrum. Upon opening the passage, he understands that there is a lot of space in the area. Grabbing his own candelabrum, he begins to descend the stairs of the bizarre dungeon. Reaching a gigantic golden door, he understands that this must be the place. With the key in hand, he comments that he never imagined he would be grateful to Felchus since he screwed him over every time he could. Going back in time, the man offers the hero the key as payment. Irritated, the protagonist states that the contract did not mention this, and that if the man continues like this, he is out. With a malicious smile, a stylish man says that if he cancels the contract with the guide, his career as an adventurer is over. Returning to the present, the hero decides to use the key to open the giant gate. The system informs that the hidden wallet of the golden key has been activated. This is the golden key of Mammon, a key that grants access to Mammon's vault. As he opens the door, the hero begins to feel astonished and realizes that there is a great treasure in the room. Walking through the corridor like Scrooge McDuck, he says that they are all incredible. Sometime later, he finds the cursed sword, a martial arts manual that teaches the technique of celestial demons. Additionally, there is also an ancient 8th circle magic book and even a dragon heart. Confused, he begins to question how they managed to acquire all of this. With little time left, he decides to use Journey Guide again to continue his search. However, the crystal leads him to a pile of gold that he will have to topple. After exerting great effort on all the coins, like Scrooge McDuck himself, he finally finds it. This is the artifact of the dot of time, the Hourglass of Kronos. At that moment, the hero understands that even if he uses the Hourglass, only the user will return in time. Thus, if he returns to the demonic war, the hero realizes that he can personally climb the tower to stop the intruders. In this way, he will at least prevent the apocalypse and thus save the tower. With that, the protagonist takes the Hourglass in his hands. The system notifies that the Hourglass of Kronos has been used and that time the tower is being reversed for the first time. It also warns that he has 10 minutes before all the same runs out. With a determined look, the hero states that if he goes back in time, he will do whatever it takes to prevent this kind of thing. However, some kind of monster of multiple tentacles invades the place, and fortunately, the hero manages to dodge it. Annoyed, he wonders why this is happening now. In reality, the monster appears to have multiple serpent heads. They all go to attack the hero, but he manages to evade them. Looking to the side, he realizes that there are not only treasures in this room, but also weapons of the gods. At that moment, he grabs Zeus's thunder, Astrap. Then, not wanting to waste much time, he quickly launches an electric strike toward the monster. The monster becomes completely enraged and, however, manages to hit the hero. Annoyed, the protagonist realizes that this monster is stronger than he had imagined. However, surprisingly, a gigantic sword appears beside him. This is Leventum, the Sword of Destruction. The protagonist states that by using the weapons of the gods, no matter how strong these intruders are, he will be able to defeat them. And moreover, this sword also exists to incite chaos. Then he swings the sword, charging toward the monster, using dolphin flames carried by the sword, while his opponent wields some kind of dark magic. Refusing to accept his death, the hero quickly dodges all the attacks from the giant serpent, and without hesitation, he delivers a simple strike to the monster, burning it forever. Analyzing the situation, he realizes that the intruders are formed by using other living creatures. Looking ahead, he notices that its main body has finally been revealed. It turns out to be a type of boar with several snakes attached to its body. The massive boar then charges forward while the hero prepares himself. Looking to the side, he spots another weapon on the gauntlets, something very convenient. This is the Radiant Spear Brionek. It is the weapon of the goddess of light known for piercing through everything that exists. In a magnificent scene, the hero throws the trident with all his strength at the boar, piercing it completely. The strike was so powerful, but the monster ended up exploding. And after going through all that, the protagonist remarks that it was incredibly difficult. At that moment, the system notifies that he's the first player to defeat an intruder, achieving a historic feat. At that exact moment, a device of Chronos activates as all the sand has run out. It explains that the Vault of Greed has collapsed, and that the vault no longer has an owner. At this moment, John is recognized as the new owner. The guild's mouth is destroyed, and the power of gluttony is granted to the player who defeated it. In shock, a hero questions what this means. Meanwhile, a system notifies that the player's causality is being reversed. All his abilities are being erased, one by one, as well as the experience he gained in the tower. Then, after all this, the system notifies that he is returning to the tutorial. Meanwhile, elsewhere in a kind of forest, several people are gathered. One of them questions what this place is, while the girl says she is sure she was at work. Suddenly, a screen appears in front of everyone. It is the system welcoming them to the tutorial. People start wondering what this tutorial actually is. With his ham on his waist, the hero questions whether he really went back to the past. Looking around, he notices that the atmosphere is chaotic, with people arguing. Suddenly, someone grabs his arm. Desperate, the man asks if the boy knows what is happening and questions what he did wrong to end up there. Upon seeing who it is, the hero realizes that he remembers this guy. This person in particular died in the tutorial, so the boy tells him to calm down. Irritated, the man asks how he could possibly calm down and explains that everyone was dragged here for no reason. He wonders aloud if this is some kind of prank and also questions where the cameras are. Analyzing the situation, the hero understands that no matter what he says, as soon as the waves begin, things will stabilize. At that moment, the system notifies that this is Chapter 1, Adaptation, and that they have only 4 minutes until the first monster wave. Upon seeing this system notification, other people begin questioning what these monsters could be. Meanwhile, the protagonist understands that everything remains the same as it was before. These are Jung's stats. Level 1, Strength 7, and Truth 9. With his hand in his pocket, the hero realizes that he didn't notice it at the time, but now he understands how serious his attributes are. However, he notices an authority of greed and of the meal, wondering what it could be. Soon he recalls when the vault was collapsing. At that moment, he understands that he can use this power as well. Without hesitation, he uses these abilities to open the Vault of Greed, obtaining the Fire Dragon's breath, Thor's hammer, and also the Celestial Demon martial arts. He affirms to himself that with this authority, he might have enough strength to fight. At that moment, the first monster wave begins. In shock, all the people realize that it is starting and question what they are going to do. From a distance, one of them spots some kind of animal. It is a pack of wolves. Without any hesitation, all wolves charge toward the people, who start running. However, when he moves to the other side, he realizes that there is also a pack of wolves there. Thus, the entire group ends up surrounded. One of them questions whether they are going to die there. At that moment, the hero says that if they don't want to die, they will have to fight. But a man appears, questioning if they are even aware of the situation they are in. Grabbing the boy by the collar, he demands to know how he thinks they are supposed to fight these things without any weapons. However, another person steps in, asking whether the man has a better plan. This man Nick trusts is named Kang Han Chul. At this moment, Jung says it's simple, and explains that while he deals with them, the others should focus on defense. The big man nods in understanding, but at the same time, questions how the boy plans to fight the wolves alone. At that moment, the protagonist retrieves the 10 paths martial arts from the vault. Suddenly, the wolf pack charges at him. Swiftly, the hero uses the 10 paths martial arts to counterattack. Striking one of the wolves, he sends it crashing to the ground. In a frenzy, several wolves lunge at the boy, but he prepares to fight. Quickly, the protagonist leaps and lands multiple kicks, taking down all the wolves in his path. Seeing all of this, the pack is stunned, wondering who this guy is and how he is fighting like that. Even the big man is impressed, realizing that the boy is incredibly strong. He knew the hero was hiding something, meant he was fighting the wolves using only his hands. He tells himself that he feels something burning inside him. Then, as he defends against the wolf, he understands that this is matter of fear nor impatience. With a furious gaze, he declares that, in fact, it is distraction. In less than a second, he grabs the wolf by the head and smashes it into the ground. Everyone is impressed by the big man as well, as he managed to defeat a wolf on his own. Stammering, one of the people wonders if they can really win, and another responds that they can because they outnumber the wolves. One of them then asks if there is anything they can use as weapons. Observing the hero carefully, he realizes that the boy doesn't have enough strength to defeat the monsters. However, in contrast, he is using his technique to land precise strikes, employing a completely different fighting style. With his body trembling, the big man declares that he wants to fight alongside this man. Shortly after, the hero finishes off all the wolves and remarks that apparently he is stuck in this place. He realizes that his body is too weak to fight the way he was used to and that he is already exhausted after the entire battle. At that moment, some kind of spider sense activates in his brain. He wonders what this feeling is as he suddenly begins to sense the gaze of an immensely powerful presence. Just then, the system notifies that the constellation of the Bed Crow is watching the boy. Surprised, he looks up and realizes that this Bed Crow is actually the original owner of the Vault of Greed, whose name is Mammon. Shortly after, the protagonist wonders if the god or demon of greed has realized his power. He understands that if Mammon discovers that he used the items from the vault without permission, he won't stay silent. And that's just the fact that he used his power without permission is already enough to warrant punishment. He realizes that he barely managed to return to the past, and now his end is already near. The system notifies that the Bent Crow has discovered distorted traces of causality surrounding him, and that the Bent Crow constellation acknowledges this and remembers the existence of the Hourglass. This shocks the boy. The system also notifies that the Bent Crow, at that moment, ends up smiling. In shock, the hero realizes that the man knows he used the Hourglass but has not yet reacted. He finds it suspicious that there is no reaction, but it's almost as if the fear is giving him permission. Relieved, the boy smiles and declares that if that's the case, he will use his authority. Then he chooses the Mouth of Gluttony, which had been subdued. The authority of gluttony is granted to the player John. At that moment, the protagonist uses his authority of gluttony. However, the system warns the target must be designated. But looking around, Seong only sees the bodies of wolves. He targets one to use his authority. A type of demonic monster with sharp teeth emerges from his hand. They lunge for the wolf, biting into it. Then the system notifies that he has consumed a brown wolf and that the nutrients have been absorbed, increasing his strength by 1 and his agility by 2. The boy then realizes that just by consuming the bodies, his stats will increase. Confident, he thinks that if he can use his authority freely, he will be able to push his physical abilities to the limit in no time. However, he soon realizes that perhaps Beelzebub, the god of gluttony, has also noticed him. At that moment, the system notifies that the hungry prince stops chewing on a wolf's thigh and looks startled. Swallowing hard, the protagonist states that he barely escaped by luck, but Beelzebub is a powerful god demon, and he cannot rely on luck. The hungry prince opens his mouth as if he is about to say something, but instead, he simply eats more meat. Reading this, Seong understands that one of the strongest demons is hesitating because of a few pieces of meat. Smiling, he realizes that this actually works to his advantage. Using the authority of gluttony, he understands that if the demon is hungry, he will let him eat as much as he wants. Upon using his authority, several monsters begin devouring the wolves. Shortly after, the system notifies that the hungry prince celebrates the sudden feast, and the boy realizes that it worked. The nutrients have been absorbed, increasing his strength by 1 and his agility by 5. These stat increases are much lower than before, as the boy notices. However, he is not too concerned with this goal of increasing his stats for now. Steven, he asks if the demon is already full. In response, the hungry prince says that this was just an appetizer. Smiling, the hero says that this is expected and that this concludes his training. Some time passes, and everyone in that place successfully defeats the wolves. At that moment, they begin celebrating such an incredible achievement. The system notifies that in the first chapter of the tutorial, adaptation has been completed and that they have successfully passed. It also informs that all participants in the wave have received 50 points. Everyone seems happy with the result. A little away from the group, the hero is also pleased because no one was injured. Unlike last time when there were some casualties and dealing with more than half of the monsters must have contributed to this outcome. Seong ranks first with 220 points, followed by Kang in second place with 80 points and Yuki in third with 40 points. Analyzing the ranking, the hero remarks that 220 points are enough. During the tutorial, individual contribution points accumulate, and the more points one has, the better the rewards for passing the tutorial. Additionally, their chances of being chosen by a constellation also increase. Seong states that naturally his goal is to be in first place, and that even though they pass the first wave smoothly, one thing he has realized is that one way or another, he will need a weapon. However, he understands that if he uses Mamma's weapon with his current stats, he will undoubtedly reach his limit. And that at this moment, he needs to use weapons to compensate for his own limitations, but the problem is that there are no decent weapons in the area. In that case, he understands that he needs to search the forest for something to increase his own stats, and that with their increase, he should be able to unlock better treasures from Mammon's own vault. At that moment, someone calls for the protagonist. There's a girl asking where he is going, while he himself wonders about that voice, which sounds familiar. At that moment, the boy realizes that it is Yusio, who was known as Whirlwind before the regression. Seong does not remember everyone in this place, but there is no way he would forget Yusio. She was becoming famous even in the upper floors of the tower, along with Kang, known as the Muscular Man. After all, she was one of the best in the tower. Exhausted, the girl asks the protagonist where he's going alone. However, the boy understands that every minute and second is crucial now that the tutorial has begun and he does not have time to deal with her right now. In response, he says that he is checking out the area and that standing still won't improve anything. However, the girl argues that they shouldn't be wandering around and should instead gather and first discuss how to handle the next wave. With his hand on his waist, the protagonist questions whether anything will change if they all discuss it among themselves, and she insists that it will help. Tiger, the boy, thinks that he does not have time for this as it is not something he can explain in detail. Seong asks what she plans to do to ease their anxiety and states that regardless, once the second wave begins, everyone will just end up hiding again. Irritated, the woman says that even so, they do not know when those wolves might appear again, and it is dangerous for the boy to go alone. Suddenly, a screen opens in front of both of them. It is the tutorial, Chapter 1. Adaptation informing that the remaining time until the second monster wave is only 2 hours and 57 minutes. The protagonist tells her that she should go back inside and that from now on, it is better to pay attention to the message system. And that while she waits, she can also organize the discussion or anything like that. He also says it would be better she could give him some time to look for a strong branch or something useful. Completely ignored, the girl just remains silent. Some time passes. Already deep in the forest, the protagonist has just finished off another wolf. With his hand in his pocket, he looks around, wondering why there are so many of them. He understands that this is the perfect time to increase his own stats. Quickly, he uses the authority of gluttony to devour the fallen wolves on the ground. However, the system trolls him, stating that he can no longer absorb nutrients from the same entity. The hungry prince claims he is tired of this meat while still chewing on it. Surprised, the hero realizes that the prince has grown bored of this food. However, he remembers that this is gluttony, and it is not something he can simply transform into a monster. Praying to the sky, he asks the demon to wait a little longer, promising to find something even more delicious. At that moment, the system notifies that the hungry prince swallows the crystals whole, and then his eyes are glowing. Gripping his weapon, the hero says he is going to conduct an experiment. At that moment, he uses the treasure vault of greed. Retrieving a sword, he chooses Gran. He realizes that perhaps the treasures have lost their forms, leaving only their power, and they should soon belong to him. Then he understands that if he fuses the treasure's power into a suitable item, it will basically transform into a legendary sword. At that moment, his weapon begins transforming into a legendary sword, with bolts of lightning surging from it. However, something seems to be going wrong. Quickly, the weapon evaporates from his hand. In this case, Seong was unable to withstand the power of the legendary sword, and it ended up disappearing. Soon he realizes that he managed to adapt it in some way, but if he had used something stronger, he would have been reduced to ashes. Additionally, the authority of greed cannot be used by anyone other than himself. If Cheyenne was wondering whether it was possible for others to use this power, he discovered the answer while using a useless treasure on the wolf. For now, his only option is to increase his abilities to the point where he can handle the treasures in question. After thinking this over, he realizes that there's nothing else to do for now. He just needs to find a weapon. As he walks through the forest, he understands that he won't find anything suitable and that it would be helpful to have a guide. Seeking an easier path, he decides to open the treasure vault of greed again, retrieving the item Not Snout, which grants an excellent sense of smell to locate prey. Quickly, this item takes hold of his body. As a result, his sense of smell becomes much more acute, and upon testing it for the first time, he catches an interesting scent. Without a second thought, the hero rushes forward, thinking that the strong smell of rust confirms his suspicion. At that moment, the hungry prince starts whining about how the skin is stuck to his back. Reading this, the hero realizes that he is dealing with a pig rather than a constellation. After running like crazy, the protagonist is completely exhausted. In the distance, a wolf watches him, growling. At that moment, the hero suddenly detects another scent. Turning around, he notices the presence of a mysterious creature. It is a wolf with an extremely murderous aura and even a scar over its eye. At that moment, the hero becomes somewhat nervous as this is a gray wolf. He considers the possibility that the wolf already knew where he was just as he had scented him, and that before his regression, he had been too busy just running away. At that moment, a massive energy envelops the hero. He declares that this time things will be different. Quickly, the gray wolf lunges at him with full force, but the protagonist in turn manages to dodge. While doing so, he notices that the wolf, besides being larger, is also faster than a common brown wolf. Seeing that he has been wounded, he realizes that this is no ordinary monster. Analyzing the situation, he understands that the gray wolf was intelligent enough to attack his weak spot, trying to finish him off in one strike. He tells himself that if he had not materialized his martial arts, he would be covered in strawberry juice by now. Quickly, the wolf charges at him again, but the hero manages to evade once more. Standing beside the wolf, he prepares to use the 10-step reverse kick, striking it with full force. However, the kick has no effect at all. On the contrary, it only ends up hurting his own leg. Annoyed by the situation, Seon wonders if this is happening because his attributes are too low, even though he is certain that he hit the wolf's stomach. Looking closely at the area, he realizes that the beast is incredibly strong and has barely suffered a scratch. Dodging once again, he understands that he has strength and speed, but not enough to surpass the wolf. As he distances himself a bit from his opponent, he questions what he should do now. At that moment, a pack of brown wolves appears to assist the gray wolf. Backing away from his position, the hero realizes that this is bad and that he might not be able to escape this time. However, once again, fate helps him by dropping a weapon right next to him. The brown wolves charge at the hero, who in turn grabs the sword. As he strikes one of the wolves, he remarks that even though the sword is rusty, it is still quite sharp. After this strike, the brown wolf crashes hard to the ground. Smiling, the hero says that for a sword like this, it's not bad at all, and then he finishes off one of the wolves. With a determined gaze, he thinks that he has finally found the weapon he was searching for, and now that he is in this situation, he has no intention of backing down. Observing the gray wolf more closely, he tells himself that he will end this before the next wave. Quickly, he uses the domination of greed. Then he activates the Rammel family swordsmanship skill and states that from now on, things will be different. Fearless of the danger, the gray wolf becomes enraged and lunges at the hero. In a frontal attack, the hero strikes the wolf's mouth with his sword. However, the wolf manages to hold it without much difficulty. The hero then pulls the sword back and swiftly delivers multiple slashes toward the animal. These strikes are enough to severely wound it. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that it's no wonder this swordsmanship is on the same level as that of the imperial family. Without giving the beast any respite, he charges at it once more. Then he finishes off the wolf with a frontal attack. The creature growls in anger but ultimately cannot resist. At that moment, the system notifies that he has defeated the boss of the wolf forest, the Gradkeeper Wolf. It also informs that the boy has leveled up and gained 500 points of personal merit, along with the Grey Wolf's hide. Sion realizes that he is excited for another reason besides obtaining his weapon. That reason is the bold increasing his personal merit, which can be achieved in various ways. The first method is through battles as seen in the tutorial's Monster Network. The second method is by encountering and defeating a monster in isolation. The third method is a bit more brutal, requiring him to defeat other players. This won't happen now, but by the end of the tutorial, the number of players drawing their swords against each other will increase dramatically. He understands that this is the easiest and fastest way to gain personal merit. Using the authority of gluttony, he absorbs the Gradkeeper Wolf. Absorbing its nutrients, he gains 3 in strength, 5 in agility, and 2 in vitality. At that moment, the hungry prince expresses his satisfaction with the meat, saying he expected nothing less. Before leaving, Seong decides to check his items. He now possesses the Forgotten Hero's sword, a long sword of category B, with the poison skill and a hero trait that increases attack power by 10%. Additionally, he has the Grey Wolf's hide, which grants charisma and the ability to instill fear in enemies, as well as the Blessing of the Wind, which increases speed by 5%. The protagonist realizes that if he handles this correctly, he might even manage to evolve to Class D. Suddenly, the bent crow stares at the Forgotten Hero's sword apprehensively, commenting that the hero is not so bad after all. Completely changing his expression, Seong wonders how much time remains until the next wave. Opening the information screen, the system notifies that he has only 12 minutes left. Donning the Grey Wolf's hide as a cloak, the protagonist declares that he must hurry. 12 minutes later, the second monster wave begins and the system notifies that people must stop the wave and prove their worth. As he walks through the forest, the hero remembers that he promised Yusu he would return before the second wave started. But he quickly dismisses the thought, understanding that this is a great opportunity to see how the others will react. With a serious expression, he states that he has no intention of driving along some fools who only know how to cry and get in the way. Upon arriving at the scene, he sees several people fighting against an army of wild boars. One of the men questions what his colleague is doing, explaining that he must not run away. Meanwhile, the muscular man and the girl continue fighting against the boars without any trouble. Watching everything from a distance, the protagonist understands that it has finally begun. A crow among the crowd starts squawking, telling someone not to dodge but to block. It then questions a blonde-haired man about what he is doing, commenting that he used to work in his company. Taking the boy states that he should fight properly if he doesn't want to be fired. Hiding in the bushes, the hero realizes that there are always useless people everywhere. Looking at the others, he notices that they are fighting better than he expected, especially Kang and Yuxio. And considering that they don't have their own equipment, both of them are doing quite well. Walking like a boss, the protagonist declares that now it's time to step in. After defeating the boars, the girl thinks that if she hadn't held onto that boy, she would never have been able to do anything. Suddenly, one of the boars wakes up and charges toward her. Quickly, the woman manages to dodge. But looking at the ground, she realizes that she is bleeding. At that moment, the boy's words echo in her mind. Meanwhile, a fierce boar continues running, ready to finish its target. In an instant, she regains her courage, telling herself that she just needs to hold on a little longer. At that moment, the protagonist appears and finishes off the boar, saving her. She is in shock at what she just witnessed. The hero then explains to her that they first need to deal with the boars that are still coming. With that, he opens the vault to retrieve the tendons of the superior orcs. Upon maxing out his ability, his body gains much more muscle fiber. As he prepares to counterattack, he realizes that his body might not be able to handle this. Quickly, the boy dodges with immense agility. Then, in midair, he prepares to finish his opponent with this single sword strike, and does so. But after defeating it, 2 more boars continue charging at him. With just one movement of his sword, the protagonist manages to dodge multiple attacks from both boars. Both the girl and the muscular man are in shock as they witness this impressive scene. Confident, the boy wonders if this was thanks to the orc tendons and realizes that he definitely feels stronger. Placing his hand on his shoulder, the bald man calls his attention, saying that he fights very well. Pointing to his employees, he comments that the boy is on a completely different level than those useless people. At that moment, the bald man makes an offer to the protagonist, asking him to become his personal bodyguard. He introduces himself as the CEO of Rowan Corporation. He says that if they make it back, he will reward him generously and then asks how much the kid wants. A bit flustered, he also says that he will offer him a department head position in his company. Smiling, the voice says that it sounds good, while the old man begins to celebrate. However, the protagonist states that he was actually looking for a good meat shield, leaving the bald man confused. Without hesitation, the hero simply kicks the fat old man to the ground. Lying down, the bald man questions what he is doing and asks if he has lost his mind. However, the boy says that since the man is big, he can take care of the creatures coming their way. Looking behind him, the man finally notices the presence of multiple boars charging at him. Thus, the man ends up being completely trampled by the boars while the protagonist appears unfazed. Meanwhile, the girl seems apprehensive about what she just witnessed. The bed crow watches the scene with a smirk, while the hungry prince whines for more delicious prey. Sometime later, everyone has rested after defeating the wild boars. With that, the second wave is successfully concluded. There's notified that all participants receive 50 points and that individual scores are being distributed, causing everyone to celebrate. In first place is John with 10 points, and second is Ken with 180, and in third is Yuxiu with 100. At that moment, it is revealed that he consumed the brown boar, absorbing its nutrients and increasing his strength by 1 and his vitality by 2. Meanwhile, the hungry prince devours the boars, savoring them and eagerly awaiting more food. Looking at the finished boar, the boy thinks that he will keep it for food, and that before his regression, all he ate was wolf meat, so he knows just how bad poorly prepared meat tastes. Preparing his meal, he comments that the rust in the mud doesn't bother him, but that he shouldn't worry about it now because he is starving. Suddenly, someone approaches, wanting to talk to the protagonist. It is a girl asking if she can help. With her hands injured, she explains that she used to run a restaurant and knows a few things about meat. At that moment, a hero realizes that she must be a chef and decides to let her handle it. Looking around, he notices a crowd of people offering to help in various ways. One of them asks how they will manage to start a fire. In response, the blonde man says that he hadn't thought about that. However, the hero ends up opening the Vault of Greed and retrieving the hunting ember to assist. Shortly after, the fire is successfully started for cooking the food. Meanwhile, the hungry prince licks his lips, sensing a delicious smell. Wary, the hero simply tells himself and he also needs to eat. Siu approaches, offering the boy some water, which he accepts. Looking at his sword, she asks if he found it in the forest. Analyzing the girl's weapon, the boy thinks she must be feeling jealous. Changing the subject, he asks if she sees the message extending and floating. Looking at the rank the girl notices she has 100 points and asks what that means. In response, the protagonist explains that with that amount, she could buy a sword and that by focusing on the points, a shop menu will appear. Impressed, the girl comments that this feels like some kind of game. With his arms crossed, Sealing says that to survive here, it's best to adapt quickly to the system. After browsing the menu for a bit, Siu chooses a sword. At that very moment, the sword drops in front of her. Smiling, she asks how he discovered this, and he replies that he simply adapted quickly to the situation. Siu says she takes up with him and calls him by his first name, which makes him curious. Explaining, the girl says that someone told her to get used to the system. Then she thanks him for letting her know. She states that she looks forward to working with him from now on. At dawn, the system notifies that there are 58 minutes left until the third monster wave. Siu then asks if everyone is ready, and one of them questions what they should do now. The girl suggests that they gather some stones to throw and provide support from behind. Analyzing the whole scenario, Seong realizes that things have changed compared to before, and that it might be because of Shiev's having someone in command helps reduce panic. He affirms that this is good because this way he can focus on the hidden piece. With that, he opens the vault again to retrieve the blue mana circle. This is the most basic element of Kane for mages to use their own magic. However, this mana circle is known to be less efficient than those of the 7 towers. But in any case, there are always various training methods available. First, you must establish a foundation with the Blue Towers method, and after that, build pillars on the foundation using a more advanced method. Additionally, he cannot forget about the Gantian Ether. Focusing, the hero states that he can draw mana through the mana circle, but this is merely a training method for magic. He thinks that for martial artists, he needs to refine his Gantian whenever he gets the chance. While meditating, he thinks of it as following a river and consults the Blue Tower's notes regarding its knowledge of Mammon's treasure. Concentrating fully, he affirms that he can feel the energy flowing through his wounds, and that by being careful, he can reach the energy trapped within him. As he wonders if his energy will merge with his own body, in a short time it consolidates in his heart. The system then notifies that the first mana circle has been successfully created using the blue training method, and that as a result, drawing mana and using magic is now possible. It concludes that he has reached extraordinary spellcasting and that as a reward, he has received 1,000 points. The constellation 3 images of turned backs watches with wide eyes. Meanwhile, the most celestial constellation displays an expression of admiration. Nervous, he realizes that several divinities related to magic are showing interest in him.